Good day and welcome to the fourth CCS Candy webinar. My name is Martin Janssen from Rensburg and I am part of the team here at CCS Mining and Industrial, part of the CCS group of companies. It is my pleasure to present today's webinar where we'll be discussing the Candy Mechanical Worksheet application. I'll aim to keep the webinar relatively short, focusing on all key points regarding this topic. Due to the large number of people logged on, we will not be able to answer any questions during the presentation. However, please submit your questions during the webinar via the provided chat function on screen. Afterwards, we will collate these questions and send the answers to everybody that registered for this webinar via email. Please note that the webinar will be recorded and that you will receive a link to download the recording. We plan to host the webinar on a monthly basis on various Candy topics. Should you not be able to attend the webinar at the scheduled time, please still register as you will automatically receive a copy of the recording. Candy features a mechanical worksheet which is activated for specific trades like mechanical or electrical to more effectively build upright using man-hours, which in the standard worksheet will require multiple worksheet lines as opposed to a single line in the mechanical worksheet. This webinar will demonstrate the effectiveness of this worksheet as it pertains to these specific trades. After this webinar, you'll be able to change the format of your worksheet to priceable item using a mechanical worksheet by allocating portions of standard resources, in this case labor, to other resources, which normally materials or plant, thus building up rates using man-hours. We're going to have a look at a standard bill of quantities and price mechanical item using the mechanical worksheet. Looking at our bill of quantities, some of these items form part of the mechanical trade and will be priced using said worksheet format. The item we will be pricing for this example is the transport, delivery, supply and installation of a Mach 3 fan. As you know, before we can price an item, we need to allocate a trade. This item falls under the mechanical trade, so we need to allocate the applicable trade. To do this, I will right-click in the trade column and select the mechanical trade code to continue pricing the item. To open the worksheet for this item, we can use any of the following methods. I can either double-click in the rate column, or I can click on the worksheet button when the item is selected, or I can right-click in the rate column and select Display Worksheet. The first thing we need to do is to change the worksheet format. Both engineering and construction worksheets may be used in the same job. The default format, which appears when a blank or unpriced worksheet is displayed, is specified in the worksheet document by clicking Tools and then Options. So I can see in this case the construction worksheet is displayed. We can also change the worksheet format by clicking View and selecting Change to Mechanical Worksheet. Once the format has been selected, it is saved as part of the price code properties, meaning this format is then allocated to the specific price code. Up to 50 resource codes, typically material or plant, can be entered in the first column. The description, unit, and rate are displayed automatically. A quantity for each resource is then entered under the quantity column. If the asterisk column is blank, the values under A, B, C, and D are regarded as total values irrespective of the quantity. When marked by an asterisk, the values are taken as unit values and the total is obtained by multiplying each value by the quantity. I will explain this in more detail later. Resource codes, typically labor, can be allocated to the four columns headed A, B, C, and D. And once this is done, quantities can be entered against the rows and columns where applicable. When the cursor is in one of these columns, the relevant resource code and details are shown in the header area. Only one resource can be allocated per column. To allocate more resources, you can build a team using complex resources. Waste is entered in the last column as a percentage fixed to 2 decimals. The process to populate and price the worksheet is relatively simple. We will start by defining and allocating the components or resources to be used in this worksheet. Next, the quantities need to be applied for each resource. Thereafter, we will identify and apply the labor resources to be used. Then the required hours for every labor resource to be used per component need to be applied, as well as any applicable wastage. And based on the above, the rate will be calculated accordingly. Firstly, the resources or components that this item consists of need to be identified and allocated to the worksheet, as would be the case in a standard worksheet. This can be done by typing in the resource code in the resource code column. Thereafter, the quantities need to be entered. The rest of the resources and their quantities can be added in the same way. Once a resource has been typed in, you can also scroll between the different resources using Control up or down arrow. For my next resource, I will need an anti-vibration mount. Quantity of 4. After that, discharge flange, with a quantity of 1. And lastly, canvas collars, which I will need 10 meters of. While in the mechanical worksheet, the following menu items pertaining specifically to the mechanical worksheet can be found under Tools and selecting Usage columns. Firstly, the headings for columns A, B, C, and D are specified under Change Usage column header names. Allocated headings will apply to the trade specified before pricing the item, in this case mechanical, and not to an individual worksheet. In other words, the headings allocated now will be displayed in the next mechanical worksheet I select if the item falls under the same trade. If, however, the next item I price using the mechanical worksheet falls under the electrical trade, I will need to define new headings. Each job has its own headings. When no heading is specified, the defaults A, B, C, or D are used. For the mechanical trade in this job, we will identify only 3 out of the 4 headings. I will select my mechanical trade and identify the resources to be used. I will be using skilled labor, semi-skilled labor, and labor. Note that these headings can be renamed to whatever suits a specific job or item. For example, for a mechanical job, we can also specify artisan, artisan assistant, and boilermaker. Or for electrical, we can specify an electrician, electrical assistant, etc. Once we have identified all the resources, we can simply close the column heading identifier and the allocation will be saved automatically. The column headings now take on the descriptions as specified. Next, we need to identify which resources will form part of the team to install that specific component. Thus, Resource codes now need to be identified and allocated to these specific columns and rows. To do this, make sure the cursor is in line with the resource and under a specific identified column. Click in line with the first resource under Skills, and I will select Tools, Usage Columns, and change Usage Column Resource. I will allocate the artisan with resource code 22602 to the skilled labor portion of the centrifugal fan. The scroll buttons can also be used to scroll through your resources to select a resource. On the screen, my unit and rate are also shown. For the semi-skilled portion, we will allocate a mechanical laborer by following the same process. Clicking on Tools, Usage Columns, change Usage Column Resource. I will then enter that resource code and select that resource. And lastly, for labor, I will allocate a labor resource if I click in line with a column, I can see that specific labor type resource displayed as well as the rate for that resource being displayed in the top left-hand corner. If a resource has not been assigned to a specific column, entry into this column will be denied. Next, the usage allocation of the different labor type resources must be indicated in the specified columns pertaining to the applicable plant or material resources. The centrifugal fan will utilize 2.3 skilled labor hours, 4.6 semi-skilled labor hours, and 8 laborer hours. Ultimately, for the centrifugal fan component, we will need an artisan working for 2.3 hours, mechanical laborers for 4.6 hours, and 8 laborer hours. The rest of the resources hour allocations can now be added in the same way. For my mount, I will need 1 hour for my semi-skilled portion and 1 hour for labor. For the flanges, 3 semi-skilled hours and 3 labor hours. And lastly, for the connections, I will need 0.25 skilled hours and 0.5 labor hours. Each meter of connection has been allocated 0.25 hours of skill and 0.5 labor hours, making a total of 2.5 and 5 respectively for the 10 meters. The fact that the values for the connections must be multiplied by its quantity is donated by the asterisk. For the columns where the asterisk column is blank, the values are regarded as values irrespective of the quantity. I've marked the canvas column with an asterisk, thus these values are taken as unit values and totals will be obtained by multiplying each value by the quantity. Waste can be added to each resource as a percentage. So 10% will be allowed into the centrifugal fan, and 10% for the connections. When the percentage waste is allocated to a resource where the asterisk has been used, the material resource rate as well as labor hours will be increased accordingly. In cases where the asterisk has not been used, only the resource rate will be increased and the man hours will be unaffected. I can see this when I display the worksheet totals. To display the totals, I will click on View and select Display Worksheet Totals. Now, the amount for my centrifugal fan of 27,500 is calculated by adding the 10% waste to the rate of 25,000. Thereafter, the hours will be multiplied by the rate for that labor portion. For instance, 2.3 hours for the artisan will then be multiplied by the rate for that artisan of 124.34 per hour. The same will be done for the mechanical labor as well as labor. These different portions are then added together along with the amount for that item to calculate the total rate for that item. Note that the quantity is only calculated into the rate of the item as an asterisk has not been identified. When we look at the connection, we have applied the asterisk, meaning that the totals will be obtained by multiplying each value of the resource by the quantity. So thus the amount will be calculated by taking the rate of 21 plus 10% waste, multiplied by the quantity of 10 to give us the amount of 231. Then, for the artisan, 0.25 hours plus the 10% waste, multiplied by quantity of 10 to give me that component's utilization of 2.75 hours, which will then be multiplied by the hourly rate of the artisan. This will then be done for the labor hours as well, after which all the portions will be added together with the amount to give us the total rate for the 10 meters of connection. Finally, all the rates are added up to calculate the total rate. Also, the utilization per labor component, for instance, my artisan, can be seen totaled at the bottom as well. After all the allocations have been done, the worksheet can be stored and the item is priced. As you can see, the basic principles remain the same. A few minor changes in the implementation and execution, effectively producing the same result. There are no specific reports for the mechanical worksheets, but the worksheets can be viewed under the Estimating Report Manager. If we look under the BOQ listings with worksheet reports under Specialized Build, we can customize the report to only show me specific trade codes. By going to the Item Selection tab and checking the Trade block, then using the drop-down list to select my mechanical trade. If I then run the report, I can see my worksheet displayed. This concludes the Candy Mechanical Worksheet webinar. I hope this session has been informative and that we have added even more value to your day-to-day utilization of Candy and its implementation in your organization and everyday working environment. Thank you to all the attendees and also a big thank you to all our users allowing Candy to make a difference on your project and within your organization. Please remember to email your local CCS office if you want to know more about Candy's Mechanical Worksheet or have any other queries. The next webinar will be looking at indirect costs and spreading these costs. Remember, if you cannot attend the webinar, please still register and you will receive a recording of the session, which you can watch on your own time. Until the next webinar, goodbye.